Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So by now everyone knows that we are getting Fusion Rover eventually, and that's pretty much a given at this point. But did you know that we might be getting him as early as version 3.2? And did you know that there are actually solid clues in the game right now that strongly suggest this is happening? So today I'm breaking down every piece of evidence that points to Fusion Rover dropping next patch. Now quick spoiler warning though, if you haven't finished the 3.1 story quest yet, come back after you're done. It's worth experiencing blind. Alright, so let's get into it. So the first major piece of evidence is the new echo set called Chromatic Foam. But before we talk about why it's suspicious, let's establish the pattern with echo sets in Wuthering Waves. Every echo set that Kuro has added to the game has a clear character owner, and the name or theme always matches that character perfectly. Let me give you some examples. So for example, we have pack of Neon Light Leap. That is Linnea's set, and she literally jumps around with neon colors in her kit. That name couldn't be any more obvious. For a Rite of Gilded Revelations, that is Luke's set, and the guy is gold themed from head to toe, and gilded means gold. It is right there in the name. Then we have Halo of Star Radiance, which is Mornier's set, and she literally has a halo in her design and attacks. And then we have Trailblazing Star, which is Aemeath's Best in Slot set. Again, the star theme matches her perfectly, and it's literally her chest icon. So you see the pattern here. Every single set is designed with a specific character in mind, and you can usually tell who it's for just by looking at the name or icon, or just reading through their Sonata effects. Now, version 3.1 introduced 3 new echo sets. We got Trailblazing Star for Aemeath, like I just mentioned. We got Sound of True Name, which we now know is for Sigrika since she's the only character announced for 3.2. But then there's Chromatic Foam, and here's where it gets suspicious. This set is specifically designed around Fusion Burst mechanics. It buffs fusion damage and gives bonuses when you inflict Fusion Burst on enemies. The problem, however, is that we don't have a single character in the game right now that can properly utilize this set. Now technically Aemeath could use it, but she doesn't actually inflict Fusion Burst herself. Her kit benefits from Fusion Burst, but she cannot trigger it. So who is Chromatic Foam for? Kuro doesn't just add echo sets without a character to use them. That's never happened before. Every set has had its owner from day one. So why would they add Chromatic Foam with no character to use it unless the character is already in the game and just needs a new element? And who fits that description the best? You guessed it, Rover. Even the icon for Chromatic Foam looks suspiciously similar to the attack pattern Sigillum uses in the Gate of the Lost Star boss fight, and I'll get to why I mentioned Sigillum here in a bit. So now let's talk about the drip marketing, because this is where things get even more suspicious. So for version 3.2 we only got one character drip marketed so far, which is Sigrika. She's an Arrow Gauntlet user, and that's been officially confirmed. But here's the thing, if you look at every previous update, Kuro has always drip marketed both characters in the same week. Yes, there have been some exceptions like the Frolova patch and the Jian patch where only one new character released, but those felt like special cases. And here's what's really interesting, this has happened before with the new Rover element. Back in version 1.1 we only had one new limited character drip marketed, which is Shangli, and she came out alongside Havoc Rover. Sounds familiar, right? One drip marketed character and Rover gets a new element. So we are kind of seeing the same pattern here. But if that pattern is not convincing enough for you, here's another pattern that I think is really important and nobody's talking about enough. Kuro has established a very specific cycle with how Rover works as a support for main DPS characters. We always get a strong DPS character first, and then we get a Rover element that acts as their dedicated support. But here's the key part, later on we always get a 5-star character that can do whatever Rover does but better. Let me break this down with examples. First, we had Zani as our main DPS. Spectral Rover was her dedicated support at launch, but then what happened? We got Phoebe, who completely power crept Spectral Rover out of that role, and then Phoebe does everything Spectral Rover does for Zani but significantly better. Then we got Cardathea as our main DPS in version 2.4. Arrow Rover became her dedicated support, and what happened next? First, we got Shakona, who was already better than Arrow Rover, but then we got Chisa, who completely removed Arrow Rover from Cardathea's optimal team compositions. He's just not needed anymore in her teams. Now we are at Aemeath. Currently Aemeath only has one really good team composition, her Tune Break team with Linne and Mornier. That's her meta team right now, but if our theory is correct and we get Fusion Rover in 3.2, he would become her dedicated Fusion Burst support. He'd be the character that enables her Fusion Burst playstyle. And here's where it gets interesting. According to certain rumors, there's going to be a new 5-star 5-star Fusion Burst dedicated support character for Aemeath coming in the future. That would fit the pattern absolutely perfectly. Fusion Rover comes first as the accessible option, and then later a premium 5-star support releases that does the job better. This pattern has held true for every main DPS we've gotten so far, or at least for the majority of them. Why would Aemeath be any different? The fact that this pattern exists and lines up so perfectly with Fusion Rover coming next is not a coincidence. Alright, so now we need to talk about Sigillum, because this is probably the biggest piece of evidence we have here. If you've played through the 3.1 story quest, you know that Sigillum is essentially a version of Rover. It's Rover's frequency that was absorbed by Threnodian Aleph 1 in the void space. Now, what element does Sigillum use? He uses fusion. All of Sigillum's attacks are fusion based. They're literally showing us a fusion powered Rover already fighting in the story. During the final cutscene, if you see where Rover follows Aemeath into the lake, we see Rover's tacet mark glowing with the exact same color as Sigillum's frequencies. You know, that distinct glow when we absorbed Sigillum earlier in the quest. The game puts so much focus on showing that specific glow, and why would they do that unless it meant something? Now, I think what happened is that Sigillum and Rover merged, right? Because if you remember the cutscene, they reconciled during that "is it worth it" dialogue moment at the end of the boss fight. Sigillum dropped trying to overtake Rover and they became one. Now that sets up the perfect scenario for Fusion Rover to exist. We've literally absorbed Sigillum's power, which was fusion, and looking ahead at the story, we're going to fight Aleph 1 eventually anyway. So the thing is basically a black hole, and we need something powerful to take it down. What if a Rover can transform into a mech form just like Aemeath? And it would make sense because she's literally a really important person in her life, and she's like Rover's daughter, and they both will be having the mech form. So same powers, same transformation abilities, right? So now here's another pattern I noticed with Sentinel resonators. Every Sentinel resonator we've gotten has given us a Rover element that matches. Jinzhou's Sentinel was Shinsi, Spectro element. We had Spectro Rover from the beginning, so that tracked. Then Rina Sita's Sentinel was Karathea, Arrow element, and we got Arrow Rover when she released in version 2.4. Now we are in Roya Frostlands, and the Sentinel resonator is Aemeath with Fusion element. Following this pattern, it makes total sense that we'd get Fusion Rover. And now here's where everything ties together. Aemeath's kit is built around two playstyles, Tune Break and Fusion Burst. Right now everyone runs her with Linné and Mornier for the Tune Break build because it's her strongest option. But her Fusion Burst build is currently underutilized, and part of the reason is because we don't have a proper character who inflicts Fusion Burst. Aemeath herself doesn't apply it, her kit does benefit from it, but she cannot trigger it. And this is where I believe Fusion Rover comes in. If Rover becomes the first character to actually inflict Fusion Burst, they instantly become a core part of Aemeath's Fusion Burst team. And this wouldn't be the first time Kuro's done this. They literally made Arrow Rover a crucial part of Karathea's best team. Only Jinzi has a top tier team comp that doesn't include Rover at this point. And I believe like once we have Fusion Rover, the ideal Fusion Burst team for Aemeath would be Chisa, Fusion Rover, and Aemeath. That's the actual squad that I believe lore-wise will go in the past timeline during the story to fight Aleph 1. And this team is literally built entirely around Fusion Burst synergy. And now you might be wondering, when will all this come together? Well, obviously, as I mentioned before, I think that all this will happen in the first half of 3.2. And you might be wondering, why did I even mention Chisa here? Well, the story is clearly building towards Chisa cutting back through time to save Aemeath. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you go and see her sequences, her S4 literally says severing the endless cycle of tragic fate. And on top of that, she's been sidelined in the story for a reason. We haven't heard anything from her all this time, and her scissors can cut through dimensions and time. So if you think about it, it all makes sense. Now I think that 3.2's first half will have us go back to the past with Chisa, merge with Sigillum properly and unlock Fusion Rover, and then we can fight Aleph 1 as that complete Fusion Burst team. And then I believe Sigrika's story happens in the second half as more of a continuation of the story. Now that would explain why Chromatic Foam was added a patch early with no user, and that would explain why only one character was drip marketed, and that would explain the entire Sigillum setup in 3.1. Everything points to Fusion Rover dropping in 3.2. Now obviously I could be completely wrong here. This is all speculation and theory crafting based on the clues we have, but the evidence is pretty compelling. The Echo set with no user, the drip marketing pattern, the Rover support cycle, Sigillum being fusion based, the Sentinel element pattern, and Aemeath's Fusion Burst mechanic all point in the same direction. If Fusion Rover does happen and they get a mech transformation like Sigillum, that would be absolutely insane, and I am all for it. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So comment below what you guys think is gonna happen in 3.2, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more Wuthering Waves content, as I'm trying to be a bit more serious about my content creation. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.